Hello and welcome to Macro Mondays here on Landy's Crypto Corner. Today is April 24th, 2023, and we're going to take a look at Bitcoin on the longer term timeframes and weave that into our daily analysis. So let's get started. We're looking at Bitcoin here on the monthly chart. I do have the Bollinger Band indicator turned on. This is the indicator that I created. You can find it for free down in the link in the description below or in the pinned comment down below. Let's go ahead and take a look at what we have seen in this past monthly candle, as we do have this candle closing at the end of this week. Bitcoin did try to trade up to the monthly basis band, coming in at around that 32,200. And as long as Bitcoin is remaining above that lower first standard deviation here on the monthly chart at around $19,000 and really above the wick low here at 19,500 on the monthly, it looks good for further tests up over time. That doesn't mean that things can't pull back in the lower term or below monthly or even on the monthly chart here. So, and that might be something that we're looking at here shortly, but what I'm going to show you here on the monthly should be pretty interesting, as if things do pull back, we have some pretty clear areas of interest. And in this case, we can go ahead and we can grab the trendline tool, and we can see where the downside support would be. And that's coming in right at around 23,300 as the first area of interest to the downside here. And that is going to be the very first big test should Bitcoin get there. I'm not totally convinced on the daily that Bitcoin's ready to go there just yet, but over time, this will be a very big area should Bitcoin see some further downside. The next big area below there, if Bitcoin is going to head down, is going to be this area down here, coming in at around $20,500. So if Bitcoin were to head down from where it is now, test and fail around this 23,500, the next very big area is going to be 20,500 to around that wick low at 19,500. And as long as things stay above that lower first standard deviation, I am biased towards this being a transitionary period from downtrend to uptrend. If it does drop the lower first standard deviation, we're probably going to go test this major low, which has not yet been confirmed as a macro low. Still plenty of time for that. Now, when looking at the monthly to the upside, the big area is going to really be, well, the area that things just rejected from, around that $28,000 or so, to the close open structure here from last May. And that's going to be around 31.8, which of course we also have the basis band just above there. So we've got some big areas when looking at a monthly. And as long as Bitcoin's kind of in the middle here, I would be biased that Bitcoin is going to, maybe come down and test, but, overall end up above that basis band and target up to the upper first standard deviation over time. Maybe this year, end of year, something like that, around 45,000 to maybe even the wick high at $48,000. Above there, by the way, I do think that things go for a run to the actual all-time high area. Now, that being said, we should check on a few things here, like our RSI. And it's not populating right now, but there's many drives of hidden bullish divergence, including off of this most recent low structure at around that 19,500. And we did trade up to the midline. This is something that I talked about in that macro video at the time, is that this was going to be the next target above the simple moving average here. And that was, we traded above it, hit around $31,000, right? And now we're trading in and around this midline at 27,700, 27,750 or so. If Bitcoin can maintain closures above the simple moving average, not single moving average, simple moving average at around 20,600 or so, I think things look pretty good. It can get down below there as long as it stays on the support, which we just identified as this area down here, kind of the last line of support on the monthly time frame before retesting lows. That's coming in around 20,500, 600 area anyway. So that's a big area of interest to the downside, as is the 23,500. And then, of course, on lower term timeframes, there's the $25,000 highs here as well, in terms of looking at things like the weekly and the daily. But as it stands at this particular moment, this candle doesn't look great, but it's not, I don't think this is as dire as some are making it out to be on crypto Twitter and the YouTube crypto space. So in this case, I'm not that concerned about it. I just think that Bitcoin's going to be setting up to provide everyone with some opportunity pretty soon. Let's go ahead and get rid of the support and resistance trend lines here, as I've already mapped this stuff out as local support and resistance areas. And then we'll drop down to the daily so that I can show you why I have the area marked out the way I do on the top side here, as well as some of the areas to the bottom side before we get into the weekly. When looking at the daily, we have the redistribution structure here from the all-time high. Well, this was not the all-time high, sorry. All-time high up here had the downtrending structure. Bitcoin consolidated below the prior low areas from the accumulation prior to the all-time high. We had this consolidation structure that turned into a redistribution down to brand new lows. Now, this area on the daily is very important. You can see that when we just looked at that monthly, this area here at $31,800 to $32,000 coming in right around the resistance, and also coming in right around that basis band. So big area. Once this area is broken above, I do think that Bitcoin's going to take a nice trip to the upside, probably in large chunks. Now, that also means that, this area that was just lost, this 28,600 breakout zone that I have marked on the shorts chart, that you guys have probably seen many times by now, that area is huge because breaking into this area gives Bitcoin the opportunity to try and break that high. Currently, Bitcoin is trading below not just the breakout area, which would be the daily breakout. This is the low side structure of this redistribution and the wick low over here at $28,000. So we have the downtrending structure. We have the bit of a higher low here compared to the low that's marked, but we have the low here to another lower high, consolidation structure, and then we have the low put in here before Bitcoin tried to retest around these wick highs. So we have the lowest close open low to the highest close open high here, with those wicks marked as the main support and resistance levels. And then, of course, we have this support and resistance level, another daily level here. Let's go ahead and we'll just grab a new arrow. But this is the prior daily breakout range, right? So we have this breakout area right here at 28,600, right? That sent us up to test in that redistribution range up to around that $31,000. Now, it did try to find support here at 28. It has since rejected in today's candle. There is some, you'll see the teal lines here are daily support and resistance, basically, for the wick high and wick low of the current trading range up here. And so if 26,500 or so is lost, that would be the wick low over here. I would be looking for tests down to the previous daily breakout area, which is coming in at 25,200 down to 24,850 or so. And that's the daily breakout area that has not yet been retested outside of just a little bit of a back test in this nice impulsive candle up from mid-March or so. Now, this is your next logical area below the current range. So from there, we start looking down to the weekly support and resistance, and then those monthlies that I talked about that are very, very, very important for Bitcoin to hold, especially this area up here. If there is a bearish reclaim of that 24,800 and below, and it does not pick up at the weekly support resistance area here, at around 24,300 or so. It's probably going to test down to around 23,300 on those monthly levels, right? So now that we have some of that defined from the daily, we can look at that weekly and we can see that we do have a high put in here. So this is a weekly high. Yes, there is bearish divergence all over the place. It's continuation drives or hidden bearish divergence. And we do see an initial rejection in the early trading of this week off of, this area, this wick low over here of that redistribution area. And realistically, targeting pullbacks are ultimately for me going to come down to around this high $24,000 to low $25,000 area. That's where I'm looking. Now, it would be nice if Bitcoin can hold up on the weekly in and above the 26,500 area. That'd be great. That would provide, Bitcoin with the opportunity to retest 28,600 and then possibly retest the highs and maybe even higher. I do not think that it's going to break out to a brand new run or anything like that. I do think that if things do test back up, especially if this 28,600 is regained, this 28 to 28,600, if that is regained, I think the local highs get tested. Maybe it tests higher. Maybe it even gets a giant wick above. But I'm not necessarily looking for a new run because when looking at momentum on the weekly, it is beginning to turn. It's not necessarily a bearish setup right now, but it is beginning to turn. So the weekly move is either going to have to start consolidating soon, or it's going to have to move down and retest for support and grab some liquidity from down below here. That also, is coming in line with some of the continuation drives of bearish divergence, which are going to be coming from, well, no, I mean, we're not actually looking at that. It's coming from all the way back here at 48,000. So I don't really put a lot of weight on that. It's such a long time frame that, it's more of this is a function of this being a transitional structure, and then we should see some tests either locally or down a little bit further, and then get some consolidation and then try to move up if it's going to remain that way. I will tell you the line in the sand is going to be 20,500 and that wick low there at 19,500. Outside of that, it's going to retest the actual lows. And if it does retest and, create higher low structure on more macro timeframes like the monthly and the weekly and stuff like that, then this would become a macro low. Right now, it's still just a major low. So when looking at the longer term timeframes, the picture that's being painted is that, for right now, from like the daily and weekly timeframes, probably looking at maybe a little bit more of a pullback. Daily might not be ready for any further downside, but we'll look at that in just a moment. Basically, I do think bears are on the clock right now. If they can't push Bitcoin past the current wick lows at 26,525, I think that Bitcoin tries to pop back up somewhere around its highs. But that's from the daily. From the weekly perspective, this is probably going to play out through May. And we know what everybody likes to say about May. I don't necessarily share that opinion, but the setup is looking for a little bit more of a pullback as it stands right now than not. But we can see that the monthly support and resistance on the weekly is lining up with the basis band. So the first downside monthly support and resistance area being that 23,300 to around this basis band coming in at 23,500. It's a big area to hold up. So from the weekly perspective, we're looking at Bollinger Bands here. Let's go ahead and clean this up a little bit. Looking at on the Bollinger Bands here, Bitcoin losing that upper first standard deviation. The next logical area to look to, should it close this weekly under the upper first standard deviation, would be the basis band. Now, the basis band will be ticking up in the next closure as well. But as it stands right now, trading below the upper first standard deviation does give us the bias that the basis band is at least in play at around that 23,500 to around that monthly support at 23,300. If Bitcoin can regain this in this weekly candle at 27,450 or so, I would be looking again for a test up to the local highs on a close open basis up here to around the wick high there at 31 to this upper second standard deviation, which just happens to be coming in right at around $32,000. And when we look at that local support and resistance, that's lining up with everything that we just talked about on the longer term time frames and everything on the daily. So that upper second standard deviation, big area to the upside. Most likely, if Bitcoin was going to retest, judging by the way that momentum looks right now on Stoke, and that's a regular Stoke, not a Stoke RSI, then I would be, favoring this turning into probably a wick, and then we're looking at higher low consolidation. And if it did just kind of try to jettison up past that resistance there, upper third standard deviation is probably going to cap things at around that 36, maybe it wicks outside of it or something on the weekly. When we see Bollinger Bands this spread out, though, it's very rare to see it actually wick outside of that third standard deviation. So on the upper end, that cap being at around 36, 200 or so, would rather probably cap things, considering where Bitcoin's trading right now, that target is not even on the board for me. When looking at the daily, you can see how support and resistance lines up with the Bollinger Bands on the daily here. We can see that we do have expansion to the downside here. So Bollinger Band on the indicator here, the volatility metric, or when Bollinger Bands are expanding or in an expansive phase, you'll see that Bollinger Band BBWP box down here will be green. And that means that it is above the moving average. And that indicates that Bollinger Bands are widening or expanding. And in this case, you just look at the direction. Are you above or below the basis band? In this case, we are below the basis band, so we're getting expansion, and we are expanding to the downside. The lower second standard deviations coming in right around the wick lows here at that 26,650 or so, with the wick lows actually coming in just below there at 26,525. We can see if we regain the lower first standard deviation here, I would be favoring another retest of $28,000. If it does regain that lower first standard deviation on a close, I would be looking to that breakout area at 28,600 to around the basis band, coming in at just below $29,000. Any closures above there, we start targeting the upper first standard deviation at around 30,000 to 30,100. Any closures above there, we start targeting the local wick high at $31,000 to the upper second standard deviation, coming in just above there at 31,200 or so, and possibly trading in and above the upper second standard deviation would give us those targets of around 31,800 to 32,400 or so. I'm not necessarily looking for that to happen before we see consolidation. These Bollinger Bands are pretty wide right now, so Bitcoin can move pretty freely between the Bollinger Bands. Typically, when Bollinger Bands are this wide, you don't see many closures outside of the lower or upper second standard deviations before we see consolidation or a little bit of consolidation. And if we do see, for instance, Bitcoin trade lower than the lower second, down into that lower third area, possibly even down to the support there in the $25,000 area, which is that daily support, those are usually opportunities on the other side of the trade. So if it's in a downtrend, usually an opportunity for a nice long position, in and around this area, and the same on the other side of that, in and around the upside. It's probably, going to be a good opportunity for a short position. Now, of course, we're talking about from a daily perspective. You're not necessarily holding on to these trades forever, although this was a nice swing trade area around the upper third and upper second standard deviation. And I would expect a nice swing trade on the other side of this. So that is going to do it for today. I did go a little long on this video. I will start trying to keep these to around 15 minutes or so. But I did want to cover the majority of the information that I usually covered in prior videos. for some of the newer people. And if you have any questions, comments, go ahead, leave them down below rather. And throw me a like and subscribe and share this video with whoever you may find it, whoever you may think finds it helpful even. And I'll talk to you in the next Macro Monday, and I'll talk to you every single day in the 60-second Bitcoin in 60-second shorts videos. Thanks so much. And you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, and evening, no matter where you're in the world. Please trade safe. And of course, as always, stay safe. With all of that being said, Landy out.